This is a short clip from my parent membership group on Subscribestar. That's where I post my most practical and comprehensive videos. Once a month, I address common questions in the form of a topic video, and I also run live monthly Q&As where parents can submit a question and briefly talk through their situation with me. Please check out my Subscribestar to learn more about the different subscription levels. Now here's the video. There's a lot to cover today, so I'm going to dive right in by reading the question that a parent sent. So she said, Sasha, I wanted to explore something that came up in this Q&A. You mentioned that in your experience, desisters tend to fall into two camps. Those for whom a gender identity is an unhealthy coping mechanism and has a tendency to recur in times of distress, kind of like an eating disorder. And then those who firmly reject their prior gender identity, and therefore perhaps these are folks who might be filing lawsuits for maltreatment. At the same time, I've also heard you say that we as parents shouldn't expect our kids to come forward to us at one point and clearly indicate that they're done with gender ideology or that they reject their prior trans identification, and that such clear behavior is the exception rather than the rule. Some kids have a really negative emotional impact. I'm sure this has something to do with how long they were in the identity, how extreme their behavior was around their gender identity. And of course, if there was medicalization, for some kids, that can create more of a likelihood of feeling very, very harmed by it. Detransitioners, of course, are part of this category. On the other hand, I think there are some detransitioners who, for whatever reason, again, this is an evolving population, detransition and say, I'm not upset about the medical changes I made. Now, if I was to catch up with those young people 20 years from now, I don't know if they'd be feeling differently, but I've definitely heard of and seen accounts of and even met some people who medicalized for some time and then said, I'm really happy with the changes now. I look kind of androgynous, or I'm this kind of place in the middle, and I have no problem with that. So detransitioners don't necessarily express regret. But again, in 5 years, 10 years, who knows exactly what will happen. But the kind of desisted kids I'm thinking about now might be mortified that they went through a period of identifying as a boy or identifying as trans. They might want to have nothing to do with it. It might be like the kid in the mom's question of why are you asking me about that? That was a year ago. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And they may not want to have anything to do with gender or gender identity or LGBTQ or even with the peers that they associated with at the time. They are probably kind of avoiding the topic rather than wanting to talk about it all the time. I think there's just a shame, put my head down, move forward, and try to pretend that didn't happen. I would say that's a negative emotional experience because they're not able to process exactly what they went through. I also think the next category, which is also a negative emotional experience, or let's say a painful emotional experience, are people who become highly reactive and kind of go on the offensive. And I think very justifiably, very understandably, the detransitioners are going to be kind of leading the way with lawsuits and criticizing the medical industry and all of those things. Again, something the mom in this email alluded to. So they may feel very, very scared or angry or confused about what happened to them. They might feel deeply hurt, both physically and psychologically, by that period of trans identification. And they might move into a kind of activism against gender ideology. I would say somebody like Helena, who's very articulate about this and writes so prolifically and so well about this, I would say she's probably in that place where she's really trying to educate people about the harms that she's experienced from gender ideology, as she calls it. They could also feel really embarrassed and self-critical about I'll use a teen word, the cringe things that they have done or said while they believed they were trans. There's kind of a disbelief or a belittling of themselves from the past when they think back about how they behaved under their kind of trans identity. And to be honest, I think young people or adults who have this reactivity may be vulnerable to getting stuck in another ideology. And actually, Helena has also talked about this. She talked about coming out of her trans identification and feeling really embraced and understood by feminists. And I think feminists had really, really helped her to make sense of her experience. But then she also found herself in a kind of radical sect of certain feminist spaces online where there were also really dogmatic beliefs. So if somebody has that kind of reactive personality, they can jump from one radical belief system about identity to another radical belief system about identity, and so on and so forth. If you found this video helpful, you'll want to join my parent membership group, where you'll find a lot more depth and detail, along with practical parenting advice. The link is in the video description below. Thanks for watching.